Hey guys, this is Tyler here, and I am going to discuss the cost of a second passport and if I think it's overall a good value. Are you getting what you pay for? Okay, so firstly, to simply answer this question, I'll say yes. I think in many cases it is good value. And one of the main reasons I say this is because of the whole supply-demand equation. If we look at simple economics, we can see that there's a very high demand for second passports, second residencies, and many countries realize this. Many governments understand this. And if they've had a very sustained demand now for many years, yes. From a simple perspective, I do believe it's worth its value and they're not overpriced. Now, that isn't to say though that some countries are probably overpriced, and there are exceptions here. But I think if anything, some of them are probably actually underpriced from where they could be at, especially if we were to look at some of the Caribbean passports like St. Kitts or Antigua, Barbados. Some of these places I think actually Dominica, these countries could probably charge more. If we look at the fact that many of them are around the $100,000 to $200,000 range, with what you're getting, it's actually good value, I think. Now also, I think in the near future, some of the countries will greatly increase their prices as the demand continues to go higher. I think there's going to be a massive exodus in the next few years of men leaving U.S. and Canada, and women also. This is also going to increase the demand drastically, and I think the prices will just go up. In like the next 5 to 10 years, I would easily see like the major Caribbean passports doubling or even tripling in price, because I think the demand will be sustained. And it may seem like a heavy investment at first, but when you think about what you're getting and what it symbolizes, these passports, actually very good value often. Consider that many of these passports, when you look at how in like the first world countries, these first world passports often require hefty investments and have big time requirements that you must spend X amount of time in one of these countries. And then when we look at these Caribbean passports that have very minimal standards you have to meet, like often you don't have to be in the country for 5 or 10 years. You don't have to be doing XYZ. It's very simple, and you can have this passport within like 3 to 6 month time frame. It's incredible. When you look at it from the time perspective and how you're saving time, it's actually a very good value. And that's why I say I think these are definitely going to be going up in the near future. People obviously are going to be opting more for these kind of jurisdictions, as I spoke about previously. We obviously saw that like Cyprus just ended their citizenship by investment program, and on a whole, Europe is becoming more and more strict with these systems, and often you have to look outside the European Union Federation to find countries as possibilities, and often they do have more stipulations. Like, for example, in Serbia, they have more stipulations. You have to spend, it's either 5 or 10 years in the country minimum to qualify for the passport. It's often not as simple, and often learn the language. There's, like in the Caribbean, often there's no language requirements, which is key. You may just have to know English, and that makes it much simpler. Now, also consider that like some of the countries, like these smaller countries, not just in the Caribbean, but in other parts of the world, they often have high amount of credibility from the perspective of other places. And remember that banking and big finances is an industry that can be very challenging if you're in some jurisdictions. They won't work with real kind of unaccredited financial systems. And if you want to, say, transfer large sums of money, or you have business transactions, it can be very difficult and challenging. So some of the like Caribbean islands, they do have enough credibility. You can continue doing the kind of transactions and other work that you need to do you to get by without having the same kind of problems. I mean, if we were to look at a place like Iran or even in Russia, you could potentially have more problems with banking and transaction, any financial related activities, much more so than some of the Caribbean jurisdictions. So from that perspective, it's actually another big plus. And also the time saver. You won't have to go having to like explain to the banks or trying to figure out things because stuff's getting blocked or something. It can be a big hassle when you're in one of these jurisdictions that's not really looked as highly upon worldwide. And with that being said, also the fact that when we look at like the crypto industry as a whole, the expansion, the bigger and bigger prevalence of crypto in many people's daily lives, having a kind of decentralized system, financial network, has also meant that you don't necessarily need to be living in a country that has a big like banking system in place. I mean, one of the major reasons why very wealthy people would go to places like New York or Hong Kong, Singapore, London was because of their reputable history with banking and in financial areas. People, obviously, these countries had all the systems set up for wealthier people to do what they needed to do, whereas now with how decentralized both large banking and then of course the crypto industry has meant that a lot of guys don't need to go to those types of jurisdictions, live and operate for their daily lives. We can also see, I mean, in the US and Canada and England, Australia, especially within the Anglosphere, these countries are becoming more and more of a hassle for especially younger men to leave. The future is not in these countries. And as we can see, the taxes just go higher and higher. All these proposed increase in state income tax and probably municipal tax, property taxes. I know my parents, they live in Chicagoland. They're about to move soon, and they've been paying like on their property, it's not a real expensive property, but like $8,000 a year. In property taxes. It's insane. I mean, this is not a real expensive house either. And I knew a guy, actually had a friend when I was living in Chicago. This was like 5 years ago, and the guy, this was like in 2015, he was paying on a house in the suburbs, it was over like $20,000 a year in property taxes. It was absolutely insane. I think the property he had was around maybe $800,000. The cost of the house. And when you think about that, it's like, I mean, I've spoken about like tax system over in Denmark and Sweden. Now, like in Denmark, for instance, the typical property tax is maybe around 2%. 800,000 on with 2%. If you do the math there, that comes to around like $16,000. So it would still be even more than in Denmark. And in many cases, it's not that much. They have other things in their laws. So when you look at this taxes, the property taxes, it just overall taxes, like in California, people are fed up with these big cities in the U.S. and just the politics as a whole. I think men as a whole are more and more demonized by the politics, by the government. I've spoken about this before. Rather than looking above, vertical, they always are wanting people to point fingers at the common man around them, rather than for people to realize who's really in charge here. With that being said, are common people still endorsing these people, these political figures who push for these socialist policies? Absolutely. Don't think that like just because, yes, there's corruption that occurs and there's other election software that maybe has certain things about it that doesn't give 100% accuracy. With that being said, there's still a large voter demographic that's voting for these politicians. And remember that, because people on a whole, that's what they're supporting. With where everything is going, it's just getting more and more socialist. And yes, taxes will continue to go up, and people are, I think, there's going to be a massive exodus in the next few years of people leaving the U.S. So, yeah, there's going to be a very high demand in these like passports, and like Caribbean countries and other countries worldwide, as people just are like have had enough and decide to relocate. Now, also from the perspective that, like in some countries, they won't allow economies to run. Like in the U.S., they could keep economies shut down. And this is another thing to remember, that if economies are shut down, what's the point of living in a country if you can't even really operate, you can't carry on business? Then there's really no point in staying in one of these jurisdictions, and you could just live elsewhere or live at a reduced cost. Try to reduce your tax. And when we look at like in Asia, like in China, I've said this, I would encourage someone, if they wanted to make it big in like the tech industry, go to China. There's probably a much more potential now, and they'll keep their country running, the economy and stuff, the Chinese. I mean, there's certainly some political problems in China, but they will keep their economy running in most cases, in my opinion. Yeah, so worldwide passports, there are some exceptions. There certainly are some that are probably overpriced, and I think most of those ones are in Europe or have recently been shut down. But you have to remember, it's not just the price tag, it's like the freedom, it's the peace of mind, it's the potential long term. There's many factors here, and when you put all of those things together, it's actually well worth the price often. $100,000 or $150,000, when you think of for many years, decades down the line, what that means for you, I think it's well worth the price. And also remember, if countries like the U.S., like if they ban these programs, or American citizens from these kind of programs, that in itself will raise the cost and actually make it, because there will be more people wanting to try get one of these passports before it's too late. Or other countries may propose some kind of ban on like a citizenship by investment program. So if you already haven't, look at what's out there. And even if you don't have the funds right now, maybe in 3 years, 5 years, get an idea of what you could possibly afford and what's an option for you. And so you be prepped for when that time comes and ready to make the move. So give me your feedback below, and thank you.